أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Reflections on the Risale-i Nur by Bediuzzaman Said Nursi podcast. This is Mustafa Tuna. Inshallah, you can follow the episodes of this series wherever you listen to your podcasts or at the website www.reflections-rn.org. In this episode, inshallah, we will continue reading the 13th Word. For those, as those who follow this podcast may remember, the 13th Word is about the comparison of the wisdom of the Qur'an, the guidance, the way that the Qur'an illuminates our lives, and the wisdom or the way that philosophies, worldviews that are not guided by revelation offer. It has two sections. In the first section, Ustad Nursi provides a treatise, a beautiful, well-argued teaching about this matter. And then in the second section, he adds his teachings from later on in life to the end of this treatise, because those sections manifest that difference that he detailed in the first section of the treatise in practical matters. What is the application of this lesson? Right? How should the manifestation of this comparison between the wisdom of the Qur'an and wisdom of other worldviews and philosophies that are not guided by the Qur'an, how should that unfold in our lives? We talked about its manifestation with regard to the youth. We read 3 pieces about prison inmates. Right? If you are a prison inmate, what should your attitude be? How should you organize your life in there with other prison inmates if this is being figured out under the guidance of the Quran? So today we will read another section, a completely different subject, but it points to the same matter, again from another point of view, the same matter from the point of view of what befalls us, the readers of the Risale-i Nur. And one may ask, what is the connection? This is a treatise about the comparison between the Quran and philosophies not guided by revelation. Well, what is the Risale-i Nur? The Risale-i Nur is an exegesis, an interpretation of the Quran, a commentary on the Quran that is written with the most urgent issues of the times that we live in mind and under consideration. So it is a servant of the Quran at this time. And if we are now engaging that servant of the Quran, if we are engaging that you can think of official of the Quran at this time, what befalls us? Does this entail any responsibility? Are there any things that we should try to do? Right? This is a letter that Ustad Nursi at some point wrote to some of his students, and they were the direct addressees, of course, of what he wrote. He makes a specific request there, but it behooves that we all read this as if it is written to ourselves, or listen to it as it written to ourselves, and think about what we can do in our lives in order to increase our benefit from this beautiful and most pertinent commentary of the Quran in our daily lives. So let's read it. So the letter was sent with this note that it was a matter that was inspired to Ustad Nursi's heart on the night of power, Laylatul Qadr. So it's a blessed night, and of course it's full of angels. Angels are descending, lines after lines of angels descending, and on that blessed night, as he must have been worshipping, he thinks of this. But as we probably mentioned earlier, Ustad Nursi doesn't say, this is what I thought. And people sometimes misunderstand this. Ustad Nursi says, this is what was sent to my heart. This is what came to my heart. And that is the reality of it. If one were to say, this is what I thought, that would be appropriating the thought. That would be ascribing agency to ourselves. Whereas thoughts usually come to us, that inner self of us, our hearts, if they are good thoughts from the angels. It may be inspired directly by God, it may be inspired by his angels, and sometimes there are bad thoughts that come to the heart too. They come either from Satan, the heart as a special instrument that's open to Satan, and the Satan communicates through that with the heart, casts its whisperings, right? Or the nafs, the lower soul. So the agency belongs somewhere else, and Ustad Nursi is simply acknowledging that reality. But sometimes people say, like, so what do you mean? Something is inspired to you? Like, are you special? No, it is inspired to all of us. Some of us acknowledge that it is inspired, it comes from elsewhere. Some of us don't. And acknowledgement is a better position because it corresponds to reality, and it does not make us thieves of thoughts. Right? We acknowledge that when there's a good thought that comes to us, it comes from God or angels. So, Bismihi subhanahu wa in min shay'in illa yusabbihu bihamdihi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh abadan da'iman. In his name, glory be to him. And there is nothing that does not glorify him with praise. Peace and God's mercy and blessings be upon you continually to eternity. Evvelen, Leyle-i Kadir'de kalbe gelen pek uzun ve geniş bir hakikate pek kısaca işaret edeceğiz. Şöyle ki, first, we will very briefly point to a quite long and broad reality that was inspired to the heart on the night of power. So, now, it is a very broad, long reality, and Ustad Nursi really summarizes it, gives us an abstract form, and therefore it is very dense and actually difficult to read. And I had quite a bit of difficulty translating this text because it is a few very long sentences that are lists of several realities. So we will try to do our best in order to understand this. I would really advise that you follow it from the text that is provided on the website, again, www.reflections-rn.org. You can go to their podcasts, then words, then the 13th word, and scroll down to the relevant section. Inshallah. I would really advise that you follow this with the text. The sentences are long. I'm going to read it at once because it will probably make it very distractive to go back and forth. So bear with me as I read the Turkish and then we will move on to the English. Nev-i beşerin bu son harbi umumide eşeddi zulmü ve istibdadı ve merhametsiz tahribatı ile ve bir düşmanın yüzünden yüzer masumu perişan etmesiyle ve mağlupların dehşetli meyusiyetleriyle ve galiplerin dehşetli telaşlarıyla ve hakimiyetlerini muhafaza etmekten ve büyük tahribatlarını tamir edememelerinden gelen dehşetli vicdan azaplarıyla hem dünya hayatının bütün fani ve muvakkat olması ve medeniyet fantaziyelerinin aldatıcı ve uyutucu olması umuma görünmesiyle ve fıtrat-ı beşeriyedeki yüksek istidadatın ve mahiyet insaniyenin umumi bir surette dehşetli yaralanmasıyla ve ebedperest hissiyat-ı bakiye ve fıtri aşk-ı insaniyenin heyecan içinde uyanmasıyla ve gaflet ve dalaletin ve en sert sağır olan tabiatın Kur'an'ın elmas kılıncı altında parçalanmasıyla ve gaflet ve dalaletin en boğucu ve aldatıcı, en geniş perdesi olan siyasetin ruh-i zeminde pek çirkin ve pek gaddarane hakiki sureti görünmesiyle elbette ve elbette hiç şüphe yok ki şimalde ve garpta ve Amerika'da emareleri göründüğüne binaen nev-i beşer maşuk-u mecazisi olan hayat-ı dünyeviyeyi böyle çirkin ve geçici olduğunu görmesiyle fıtraten beşerin hakiki sevdiği ve aradığı hayat-ı bakiyeyi bütün kuvvetiyle arayacaktır. So this was one sentence. We will read the sentence from beginning to end in English too, and then try to reflect upon it, try to think how we can understand it better. As the humankind recognizes, as a result of its most severe oppressions and despotism, merciless destruction and the bringing of hundreds of innocent ones to ruin because of an enemy in this last general war, which is World War II, of the dreadful despair of the defeated and the dreadful panicky rush of the victors, of referring to as a result of the dreadful compunction arising from maintaining their rule yet not being able to repair their great destructions, of it becoming apparent to most that the life of this world is temporal and temporary and the fantasies of civilization are deceptive and sedative, of the high aptitude in the innate human nature and the quiddity of humanity becoming largely wounded in a dreadful way, of the emotions pertaining to everlastingness, baqa, which worship eternity, and the natural love of humanity becoming awakened in excitement, of heedlessness, misguidance, and the most rigid and deaf nature shattering under the diamond sword of the Qur'an, of the very ugly and brutal true face of politics, which is the most drowning, most deceptive, and the widest veil over heedlessness and misguidance on the face of the earth, that. So as a result of all of these, as the humankind recognizes that worldly life, which is the humankind's metaphorical beloved, is so ugly and transient, certainly, and as its signs are becoming apparent in the North, in the West, and in America, there is no doubt that the humankind will seek with its entire strength the everlasting life that humans truly love out of innate nature. So, something happened. As a result of that, humanity saw that worldly life, which is the humankind's metaphorical beloved, is so ugly and transient. People recognized that worldly life is transient, temporal, and therefore, because of that, ugly. But they were in love with it. They are in love with it. They recognize that this beloved of theirs is not worth the love that they give to it. And therefore, Ustad Nursi calls this metaphorical love. And therefore, upon this, following upon this recognition, they start to search. This big crisis in life that made them recognize the reality of life leads them to search for the remedy to their problem. Their problem is that they love this world, but they see that it is temporary and transient. Now they are looking for eternal life. There's no doubt that the humankind will seek with its entire strength the everlasting life that humans truly love out of innate nature. They are created to love life that lasts. They are created, that is hardwired into their existence, that they love everlasting life. However, because they do not see it immediately, they turn that faculty that is created in them to what they see, which is the temporal and transient life. And therefore, that love that they have to the temporal and transient life of the world is not real. It is metaphorical. It is misplaced. If it is understood as metaphorical, that means that it is pointing to something else, then it can be useful. From the metaphor, you can move to reality. But if you do not recognize that and think that this is be all and all, this is all of it, then it is dangerous. Now, what is it that made them recognize this situation, the ugliness of worldly life and the reality of worldly life, and that led them to search for the real object of that faculty of love that is hardwired into their existence? It is World War II. Said Nursi refers to it as this last general global war. As a result of its most severe oppressions and despotism, what is it's referring to? The humankind, when left alone, when left without the guidance of revelation, without the guidance of the one who knows their nature, their quiddity, what makes them work well and what makes them not work well, right? Without guidance from the maker and owner of this product, if you will, right? They are led to oppressions and despotism. They are led to merciless destruction. It is in there. It is in the human nature, and thank God that He sent us revelation and inspiration, and He sends us these angelic thoughts. He inspires us Himself, and He keeps us away from the destruction, oppression, and despotism of our compulsive lower souls and the societal ramifications of those compulsions, right? But from time to time, we are overcome, and it shows itself as individuals and as societies. And war is one of those situations in which the destructive, despotic, oppressive nature of humankind comes to fore, and it becomes visible, recognizable, as a result of its most severe oppressions and despotism, merciless destruction, and the bringing of hundreds of innocent ones to ruin because of an enemy in this last general war. Right? There is an enmity going on, and 200 years after, when we talk about wars that happened, let's say in the 19th century or 18th century, what do they mean to us? Not much. Not much. In some cases, it means nothing, just stories. But for the people that were fighting at the time, it meant, life and death matters of life and death. Why? That was deceptive, because they became enemies to one another. They were filled with this satanic emotion of vengeance. Because of an enemy, they destroyed, brought to ruins hundreds of thousands of innocent ones to ruin. Right? the ugliness of the destruction and oppression that results from the shortcomings of the compulsive soul become most visible in war. In war, humanity shows its merciless face. Now, is this relevant to people who lived in mid-20th century only? I mean, if the answer is yes, I would advise that you think again and look around and try to figure out what's going on around the world. Around the world, and especially among Muslims. What's going on in Yemen? Hundreds of thousands of children, innocent children, starving. What has been going on in Syria for years now? Millions and millions of innocent children, elder people, women, displaced, bombarded, killed, mutilated, tortured, starved. It's happening now. It may not be happening here, if we understand here as, our house, our neighborhood, the space between our workplace and our house, perhaps even our country. Yes, it may not be happening here in that sense, but it's happening here if we think of the world as our abode. It is happening here and now. So this is addressing us too, as the humankind recognizes as a result of its most severe oppressions and despotism, merciless destruction, and the bringing of hundreds of innocent ones to ruin because of an enemy in this last general war, or as a result of the dreadful despair of the defeated. So this is after the war. Dreadful despair of the defeated and the dreadful panicky rush of the victors. I mean, a little bit of history here, of course. World War II fought between the Allies, which was America, England, partly France since it was invaded, and most importantly the Soviet Union on one side, and on the other side you had Germany, Italy, and Japan. These were the big players of the game. And in the end, it was the Soviet Union, England, or Britain, and the US that defeated Germany and Italy, and later on the US defeated Japan. And what happened after this victory is that the Soviets on one side, and Britain, America, and some French forces on the other side were fighting together against the Italians and especially Germans. But once war was over, what happened? The Americans, British, French from the west and the Soviets from the east rushed to Germany, and that they met in Berlin, and they divided Berlin up into two parts because they represented two, one being capitalist, the other being socialist, two worldly philosophies, worldly worldviews, worldly ways to look, understand, and process the world. And they recognized that they were not seeing eye to eye any longer, and now they are rushing to get whatever they could out of the ruins of what they defeated, which was Germany and Italy, but especially Germany, right? The defeated are in despair, and they're dreadful, they're fearful, they don't know what is to happen. Although in the case of Germany especially, and Italy, and also Japan, the recovery was quite successful, but at that time they did not know, and the victors are rushing in this panicky state to get out whatever they can, and they are not thinking about what is best for these people. They are thinking about what is best for my interest after I have fought for so many years and made so many sacrifices, etc., etc. Over 50 million people died in World War II. close to, or perhaps slightly more than half of that, were from the Soviet Union. And the great majority of the dead from both sides, on both sides, were civilians, children, women, elderly, civilian men, right? So this is becoming visible now. What did we do? What was it for that we killed so many people, right? Of the dreadful compunction arising from maintaining their rule, the victors, right? They maintain their rule, but there is enormous destruction, yet not being able to repair their great destructions. Again, the recovery was actually quite successful in Germany, to some extent Italy and Japan, but not so much in the Soviet Union. And the recovery took a lot of another war, a lot of sweat and labor, lost hopes, sacrifices on all sides, right? And it wasn't apparent that it would turn out to be a relatively successful recovery in places where it was a successful recovery. So at the time Said Nursi wrote this, right, they were shocked. They had been fighting with adrenaline pumped into their bloods, and therefore not recognizing the destruction that they were wreaking. But now, after the war, they look around and start to recognize that yes, they preserved, maintained their rule, but they are not able to repair their great destructions. And even that recovery is in material sense. How many men and women died and how many families were ruined, right? Those families did not reappear all of a sudden. People started their lives anew. In the Soviet Union, so many men had died that there was a shortage of men, and many women went without families, without being able to marry. And then they were these pensioners, old pensioner ladies without anybody to take care of them when the Soviet Union collapsed, and all social services that existed in the Soviet Union were blown into air. A lot of suffering still going on. It is not over. It is still going on. So yes, they built highways and railroads and skyscrapers and factories and whatnot. They went to the moon and split atom and etc., etc. They did all these things. They developed technology, but a great majority of the people still suffered. And same thing in Germany in terms of the number of men killed and the number of women left behind, etc. The suffering was there. Even with the recovery, suffering did not go away. So much destruction cannot be done away with without suffering. Of it becoming apparent to most that the life of this world is temporal and temporary, and the fantasies of civilization are deceptive and sedative. Fantasies of civilization. There are good ones. Radio enables us to broadcast. If you were reciting Quran on radio, for instance, to broadcast God's word through the atmosphere to all places where people can just put a cheap receiver on the other end. Telephone makes us talk to one another at long distances. Now, of course, this is much later, but there are fantasies of civilization that we enjoy, new ones too, right? The internet, we can communicate at very long distances. The circumstances of this pandemic that put us all, or many of us, under lockdown conditions, taught us that we can actually use the internet to create new ways of sociability, hold conferences and webinars and whatnot through the internet, teach and learn through the internet, etc. So there are lots of these fantasies of civilization, and at that time, as it followed the war, they were able to split atom, actually during the war, and explode a bomb that was able to kill 70,000 people at once, and they were able to send these spaceships to the space and then to the moon, etc. So yeah, humanity was able to do a lot of amazing stuff, but they were also coming to terms with the realization. They were also realizing that this world is temporal and temporary. So what happened? You went to the moon, but what happened? Like, what is the benefit of that? Of course there are benefits, but what is the long-term, lasting, ultimate benefit of that? Unless it is converted into something that's going to be of benefit forever. What is the benefit of the internet and the internet conversation that you've had with your relatives who are living away? Unless that is done, let's say, as an act of Silai Rahim, preserving the bond of the womb, as an act of worship, as an act of following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore it brings you and your relatives that you have been communicating with together again in Jannah, in the paradise forever. It will all disappear, evaporate. What is the good of that which evaporates? What is the good of the inscription that you write on water? What's the good of the inscription that you write on, let's say, not water, but ice, that lasts for, let's say, 2 hours, and then the sun comes and it melts away and disappears? What is it that you have written that stays for the long term? But humanity is understanding now, right, that the life of this world is temporal and temporary. States of crisis, situations of crisis like this, the war, and of course the pandemic is a similar situation too, right? Recognizing that the fantasies of civilization are deceptive and sedative. They put us to sleep. They numb our senses so that we stop being able to recognize reality as reality is. They deceive us out of reality as reality is, right? But when a crisis hits, then we recognize that, oh, this was deceptive. It had numbed our senses and we were not able to recognize reality. But now that we are woken up from our slumber, from the slumber that we were put to through by these fantasies, right? We are now recognizing that this is temporal and temporary. It's not worth the value that we have attributed to it. Or as a result of the high aptitude in the innate human nature and the quiddity of humanity becoming largely wounded in a dreadful way. The high aptitude in the innate human nature and the quiddity of humanity. What is that? What is the high aptitude in innate human nature? All people, all children are born according to fitra, right? The innate human nature. The fitra is Islam. The fitra is submission. The fitra is iman. It is faith in the Creator. The fitra is to fulfill the duty that we are all sent here for, which is to connect with our Lord and pass the trial and test of our recognition of our worshipful slavehood before Him, our recognition of His Lordship, so that when we move on to the eternal abode, we have proven that we will be able to partake its blessings. We will be able to appreciate, use, sense, and appreciate its blessings so that we can be put in paradise out of God's mercy. but so that we can be put in paradise and be worthy of the blessings that he showers on his slaves in that beautiful place. That is the innate nature. That is the quiddity of humanity. That is the aptitude in the innate human nature, right? But do we all fulfill that aptitude? Do we all actualize that aptitude? No, we don't. We lose touch contact with that aptitude. And the war shows the crisis, the sufferings, and the shocking outcome and realization of the end of the war shows how much we are wounded, how much we have fallen away from that innate aptitude and the actual duty that we are sent to this world with, how much we have wasted our capacities and faculties and capabilities, how much we have wasted our aptitude, how much we have undermined our own interests and the instruments that we have been blessed with, bestowed with, in order to fulfill our duties. We come to that realization. This is not working. This needs to be healed. This needs to be healed. We start to recognize that in situations of crisis like this. And also, as a result of the emotions that worship eternity and pertain to everlastingness, and the natural love of humanity becoming awakened in excitement. So humankind have emotions. It is again hardwired. It is built into their innate nature that worship, or perhaps a better translation would be revere, right? It loves eternity. It aspires for, wants, desires eternity so much that reaches almost the level of a degree of reveration. Emotions that revere eternity and pertain to everlastingness. Now, those emotions of those intense emotions of love and desire, they're meant to belong to everlastingness. They're meant to pertain to everlastingness and the natural love of humanity, right? What's the natural love of humanity? That's the love of the one who is eternal. At the end of this letter, Ustad Nursi will end it by saying Al-Baqi and Al-Baqi, or the eternal one, or the everlasting one. You are the everlasting one, right? The love that is given to humanity is to love God. The desire, right, that is for life is for eternal, everlasting life. And that is, Ustad Nursi is saying, becoming awakened in excitement because of all this suffering and understanding the temporariness and temporality and worthlessness of this temporal world. People losing their loved ones, for instance, in the war. Before the war, before the pandemic, people were going about their lives and living happily together for an ordinary, normal, let's say family, right? Everybody has some people that they love, unless they are mentally problematic, right? They were going about their lives among people that they loved and felt comfortable with, etc. But all of a sudden, the war came, or the pandemic came, and it killed some of them, and it awakened their eyes to the fact that this world is temporal and temporary, and now they desire to be with them again. Now they desire to overcome the temporality of this world and be with them again. Last, right? That their eyes are open to the reality of death, and they start to look forward to, not with desire, but with dread. They start to look forward to their own deaths, and now they want life after death. Before they did not, but now they do want life after death. More of it. They want everlastingness. Again, that is a desire that is put in us. It's normal. It's normal. And what matters is for us to use it in the right place. If we start looking for everlastingness in this world in weird ways, some people say, for instance, if I leave a beautiful work of art behind, it's going to live forever. Of course, that's not forever either. Maybe it's going to last for 300 years, but it's going to live long, right? And people will appreciate it. And it is this appreciation that I get from people that is meaningful for me in life. And therefore, well, you will not know it. If it is not a work of art that you produced as a manifestation of your love of your Lord, and in a way that serves a real good purpose, and therefore you continue to receive benefits, spiritual rewards from it, maybe it will last. Maybe it will last for thousands of years and people will continue to appreciate it for thousands of years, but it will not be of benefit to you. You will not know about that. You will be dealing with your own real problems in that intermediate realm and then in the hereafter, right? So what that desire is for real everlastingness, for real existence in the long term, or into eternity. Right? So of the emotions that worship eternity or revere eternity and pertain to everlastingness and the natural love of humanity becoming awakened in excitement. Next, of heedlessness as a result of, right, humanity recognizing the ugliness of worldly life as a result of another motivation for this, as a result of heedlessness, misguidance, and the most rigid and deaf nature shattering under the diamond sword of the Qur'an. What's that? Heedlessness, misguidance, and the most rigid and deaf nature shattering under the diamond sword of the Qur'an. What's nature? Nature is, well, it's a construct. It's not something. The way we are taught to think of it oftentimes in public schools all over the world, right, is something that does not exist, but we are taught to think of it as something that exists and that has agency. Mother Nature did this. Mother Nature is getting back to us because of our actions that led to its destruction, that led to the climate crisis or whatever, right? This kind of talk, as if this nature is something that exists and does things, misguides us into heedlessness to the reality of things as they are. The reality of things is that, yes, there are patterns and regularities in the creation. Things happen with apparent causal relations, within apparent causal relations. Causes and effects are created together in a regular way in the ordinary life that we witness around us. But the reality of that is that this regularity does not owe to anything like nature or any inherent power in matter, but rather to God's command. And therefore, God is the only agent in and everything. But when we put that behind us, when we close our eyes to it, when we become heedless to it as a result of the misguidance of this concept of nature, which is promoted or was promoted by this concept or notion of science and the deceptive power that came with it in the 18th, 19th centuries, industrial revolution, and the economic booms of the late 19th century, and so on and so forth. Right, that humanity became pumped up in the pride of what they thought they had created, although it was God who bestowed it to them. Right, so Ustad Nursi, this is something that Ustad Nursi had to grapple with really seriously because it was so powerful at the turn of the 20th century, and especially among the Muslim intellectuals, secular Muslim intellectuals, who were taking power over in everywhere in the, or most places in the Muslim world. So he's saying, one, so you wanted technology, you wanted industry, you wanted science that led to discoveries. Look what those discoveries brought upon you. Look at the destruction that those discoveries brought upon you. They are being shattered. They are shattering under the diamond sword of the Quran, because, well, it is the guidance of the Quran, right, that's prevailing in the end. The Quran told you that the foundation of life experience is not struggle, but cooperation and mutual assistance. But you thought that it was struggle. And you created a world, you produced a world in which struggle became the core and cause of your existence. And see what it led to. It led to negative nationalism, which led to the World War, which killed 50 million people and put billions in ruins, which hurt everybody, and everybody is suffering now. See, you are now seeing the reality of it. And another way to look at this is Ustad Nursi wrote several treatises with inspiration from the Quran that shatters this notion of nature and materialism, and provides really, really strong, really powerful logical argumentation, which then can also have a transformative effect on the human psyche, and that is given to humanity at this time, right? At this time when the human almost worship of this non-existent concept of nature, right, which is very similar to the human worship of idols, for instance. Idols do not exist either, right? So the human worship of this concept of nature and science and power that supposedly comes with it is shattering at an intellectual level. Humanity is being provided with the arguments against it. Perhaps it was not only Ustad Nursi that was provided, who was provided with these arguments. It was an inspiration that was given to humanity altogether at this time. And Ustad Nursi represents I believe, the apogee, the pinnacle of this message that the Quran offers to us at this time, right? So that philosophical misguidance, right? That philosophical stimulation that led humans astray is now being shattered through the use of the intellect. And another stimulus for recognizing the ugly face of the world. As a result of the very ugly and brutal true face of politics, which is the most drowning, most deceptive, and the widest veil, causing heedlessness and misguidance on the face of the earth, becoming visible, that. Now, this is the last one among these causes of recognizing the ugly face of the world that Ustad Nursi mentions in this sentence. This is the last one. It's about politics, and he says, he puts the biggest blame on politics, and says it is politics that is drowning us, that's deceiving us, and that's preventing us from seeing reality as reality is, that is pulling a veil before our eyes and putting us into heedlessness and misguidance. How? Again, think of that time, like on one side you have Nazi Germany, National Socialism. The state becomes the deity in people's lives. You have Italy, fascism. The state again, becomes the most powerful thing in people's lives, and everybody is expected to sacrifice their lives, not only their lives but also their values, everything that they have, for the state, all for the state. And what is the state for? Politics, right? It's in the case of the Soviet Union, perhaps it's going to suggest some ideas, it will make some promises for a better future, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, in practice, it becomes an end in itself and starts to serve itself. The state, as this conglomerate of institutions and individuals, becomes a self-serving entity. And politics is the way of maintaining that entity in people's lives, convincing people that the sacrifices that they are making are worth making, although at the end of the day, what is it? What are you making the sacrifice for? Something that you call the state. But the state, if you dig it up well enough, is again a conglomerate of institutions and individuals who are fighting with each other in order to control the mechanisms of that entity. And for that purpose, they are willing to eschew all morality, eschew all friendships, indebtedness, eschew all sentiments and values, eschew the rights of perhaps thousands and thousands of people for some future promise in the future, which may come or may not come. Politics is, in a sense, the art of convincing people that ends justify the means. Politics is the art of putting before people an end that may or may not come, promising something and telling them to do things that they would otherwise not do in order to work toward that end. And in the process, the whole process gains a life of its own, and some individuals start to benefit from it. Now, of course, this is not all politics, but this is politics when politics is conducted in a worldly sense, in the sense that people who engage in it think of themselves as these rational animals, rational humans of economy, or the economics, the science of economy. They think that what matters is the maximization of interest. They pursue what came to be known as a social Darwinist idea or ideology. And sometimes perhaps they do not do this at the individual level, but they do it at the state level. So it is a problem when morality is lifted from among people as they're interacting as individuals. But in the same vein, it is a problem when morality is lifted from societies as societies are interacting with each other as societies, right? These are all problems that politics has caused, and it was most visible during World War II as millions and millions of people were fighting with each other in the name of these abstract constructs that at the end of the day served small minorities in each of those states. And we should not think that we are absolved from this if we live in what used to be known as like first world countries, liberal, democratic, capitalist, whatever places. The main philosophy that defines this may still be there, right? As long as we think that ends justify the means, we are in the traps of bad politics. We need to be able to institute morality, values, mercy, compassion, and so on and so forth as we conduct policy. Policy and politics are different. Here, Ustad Nursi is talking about politics, right? So, as a result of all of these, right, as humanity recognizes that worldly life, which is the humankind's metaphorical beloved, is so ugly and transient. Certainly, and as its signs are becoming apparent in the North, in the West, and in America, there's no doubt that the humankind will seek with its entire strength the everlasting life that humans truly love out of innate nature. So Ustad Nursi says this right after World War II. The circumstances are ripe and people will be seeking value. And he says that if we get to the core of this and understand human nature, we can see that people will be seeking everlastingness. That is going to be the number one thing that they will be seeking, and that everlastingness will take them to the Creator, and the most truthful representation, most truthful account of the Creator, most truthful teaching about the Creator is the Quran. It will take them to the Quran. And he's saying we see people seeking, and when he says in the North, in the West, he is referring to particular events, particular incidents that happened at the time, and he was excited. You know, a society in America says, you know, we are going to look for truth, and you know, when people are looking for truth, Ustad Nursi has no fears about them. No fears about engaging them, because he knows that he is representing, he has truth in his hands. He knows that, right? So he's not happy that so much suffering has taken place, so much destruction has taken place, so much oppression has taken place. But he's a believer. He puts his trust in God. And one who puts his trust in God can always find hope. And he is finding a big hope in all of that's happening, or that has happened, and that has left behind a ruin during World War II. And the hope is that now that people are looking for truth, that's good. Because that is what they are here for. People are awakened from their heedlessness, from their slumber and sedation and numbness. They are looking for truth. People are looking for truth now too. We have been going through some excruciating, unprecedented, shocking, surprising, puzzling, disorienting experiences. This will inevitably lead people to seek meaning in life. Now, that is a global occurrence at the level of humanity. In individuals' lives, this is happening all the time. Everybody, every human being goes through experiences like these because God, out of his mercy, gives us opportunities to recognize reality as reality is. So even if it were not something happening at a global scale for the entire humanity, we are surrounded with people who are seeking truth. A beautiful representation of this was, at some point, I had received this message from a sheikh in America, who lives in America, who was a convert to Islam. And it was a picture of a concert, probably a metal or like heavy rock concert, where people are dressed up in really weird ways and contorting their bodies in the moment of the melody, the music and the noise, and dressed up in these bizarre ways, and made their hair in these bizarre ways, etc. So this dark, contorted and bizarre image of a few individuals on the stage at a in a heavy rock concert, and under it said, mentioning his own name before his conversion, so and so is looking for God. So we need not be deceived by appearances. We need not be deceived by the fantasies of civilization or the appearances of artificial happiness and enthusiasm and so on and so forth in people's lives. We need to recognize that ultimately everybody is looking for eternity, looking for connection with the Creator, and finding eternal felicity through that connection. And alhamdulillah, praise and gratitude be to our Lord, we have found it. We have found it in the most truthful, in the most accurate, most truthful, most beautiful place that it can be, which is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the message that God sent to us through him, the Quran. We found it here. Now, do we have a responsibility that arises from this? That's going to be the next section or sentence of this part of the 13th word. But it's a long sentence again, and I don't think that we'll do justice to it if we try to rush through it. Inshallah, what I will do now is I will just read the English translation of the coming sections of this part, and leave the reading of the Turkish and reflection to the next episode, inshallah. So, and since the Quran of miraculous exposition, which has had 350 million disciples over 1,360 years in every century, the rulings and the cause of which millions of people of truth have affirmed and endorsed with their signatures, which exists in the hearts of millions of memorizers with sanctity, and gives lessons to humans through the tongues of those memorizers at every minute, which, again, the Quran, right, which gives the glad tidings of everlasting life and eternal felicity to humans in a way the similitude of which does not exist in any book, and thus heals the wounds of human beings. Since this Quran of miraculous exposition gives the glad tidings of everlasting life and teaches about eternal felicity, which it claims explicitly and by implication perhaps tens of thousands of times, with its forceful, powerful, and oft-repeated verses and unshakable definitive proofs, of course, and there is no doubt that unless the humankind totally loses its mind and a material and metaphysical doomsday erupts over its head, the broad masses and governments of the face of the earth will search for the Quran of miraculous exposition, similar to the famous literati of Sweden, Norway, Finland, and England. Again, these refer to incidences of that time, who are working for the acceptance of the Quran, and the very important society in America that is searching for true religion. And once they understand the Quran's truths, they will embrace it with spirit and soul. Because there is nothing like the Quran from the point of view of this reality, nor can there be, and nothing can replace this greatest miracle. Whenever there were crises in the world, the rate of conversion to Islam has increased. Whenever people were driven to seek truth, the numbers of conversion to Islam increase. Second, since the Risale-i Nur has served like a diamond sword in the hands of that great miracle, has shown the Quran's miraculousness, and has compelled even the most obstinate enemies to admitting so. Since the Risale-i Nur, which is a metaphysical miracle of the Quran, which announces the Quranic treasure in a way that illuminates the heart, the spirit, the emotions, and that offers the Quran's remedies, and which knows no other reference or recourse other than the Quran, is fulfilling that duty. And since it, that is the Risale-i Nur, has emerged completely victorious over utmostly obstinate deniers of religion and over the dreadful bouts of propaganda against it, this is in Turkey at the time, since it has smashed nature, with a capital N, the firmest and strongest fortress of misguidance, into pieces with the Treatise on Nature, this is a book that Said Nursi wrote, and since it has dispelled heedlessness and shown the light of monotheism in the thickest, most drowning and broadest horizons of heedlessness and the widest veils of science, with the sixth matter and the first, second, third, and eighth demonstrations of the fruit in the staff of Moses, and these are other treatises that Ustad Nursi had written. Of course, as it is now officially permitted to open private study centers for religious instruction, this refers to a new development in Turkey after 1948, but especially in the early 1950s, which are necessary for us and essential for the nation. The disciples of the light, that is, the readers of the Risale-i Nur, should each open a tiny study center of light everywhere as much as possible. It is true that everybody benefits to some extent on their own by individually reading, but not everybody can understand every matter that is in it completely. Furthermore, since these are explanations of matters of faith, they are knowledge, gnosis, and worship at the same time. There's a side note here we will come to. God willing, corresponding to the 5 to 10 years spent in the old madrasas, the madrasa of light, so that's the madrasas of the Risale-i Nur, will secure the same results in 5 to 10 weeks, and they have been so doing for 20 years. Moreover, for the sake of their worldly and political lives, as well as their hereafter, it is essential for them not to interfere, for the government, the people, etc., for them not to interfere with, after all, but to work for the promotion and publication of these flashes of the Quran, which have many benefits for this government, this nation, and this country, and of the Risale-i Nur as those flashes announcer, so that this can be an atonement for the dreadful sins of the past. And here think about Turkey between 1924 through 1950s, where madrasas were closed, tariqas were banned, the Arabic language, the Arabic alphabet was banned, and Quran was forbidden to be recited, etc., etc. Dreadful sins of the past, and a wall before dreadful calamities to come, and before anarchy, a wall before calamities and anarchy. Third, I was much in need of reading the Quran with delight and enthusiasm in this honorable Ramadan. Remember, Ustad Nursi said this was inspired to his heart on the day of, on the night of power. Yet I panicked under the influence of a painful sickness, panicked that he won't be able to read the Quran enough, material and metaphysical troubles, fatigue, and many chores. Then, all at once, I started to read the miraculous parts of the Quran, written miraculously in Husrev's. Husrev is one of Ustad Nursi's students who had very good writing, and he would scribe many of the Risales before it started to be printed. Written miraculously in Husrev's agreeable pen, and the bright Hizbul Akbar Qur'ani that is full of divine favors. This is a book of selections from the Quran prepared, that Ustad Nursi prepared, that is full of divine favors and that earned much spiritual rewards for Hafiz Ali and Tahiri, one after the other. This gave me such a delight and enthusiasm. So he starts to read these two things. This gave me such a delight and enthusiasm that all my tiredness disappeared. As I was listening to the Quran's lesson from them in a most bright way, without interference of any obsessive thoughts, I desired with my entire spirit, this is happening on the night of power, intended and made a determination to have our miraculous Quran printed in the same way that we have had the Hizbul Akbar Qur'ani printed, and we will do so, God willing, miraculous Quran refers to a Quran that Ustad Nursi marks the various congruences in the text. For instance, on the same page you have the Lafz Jalal, the word Allah, occurring 10, I made up this number, 7 times, and they all line up. Things like this. He had marked this on his Quran, which was the Quran of Hafiz Uthman. It was the scribe was Hafiz Uthman, which is one of the most common scripts that is still used in Turkey and many parts of Asia, East Asia, etc. So it was one of the most standard prints, and he takes it and he starts to read it, and as he's reading he starts to recognize that all these alignments and congruences, and he marks them, and then he gives them to Husrev Altınbaşak, his student who had really good writing, and Husrev Altınbaşak starts to write it and color coding it, where the places that Ustad Nursi has marked are coded in color. So it's a beautiful print of the Quran that shows the miraculousness of the Quran even to children who don't know how to read, because even if you don't know how to read, you can see that these things are lining up, etc. So anyway, inshallah, this last section that we sped through in English translation only, we will work on that. We will reflect upon it in the next episode, inshallah. But everybody can start thinking about it already. Al-Baqi huwa al-Baqi. The everlasting one, He, God, is the everlasting one. Your brother Said Nursi. And here your brother Mustafa Tuna is reading this and trying to convey it. May God forgive his shortcomings, and may God put the meanings that Ustad Nursi had meant in your hearts despite my shortcomings. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim, wa akhiru da'wahum alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha.